Donc, bonjour.
Good morning.
To everyone present and those of you joining us online today. I want to acknowledge that we are gathered on their traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, who have stewarded these lands for generations. The work of Ombudsman Ontario takes place on the lands and territory of more than 130 First Nations, whose distinct cultures and histories predate the existence of this province. We are committed to building respectful relationships with Indigenous peoples and communities to be able to provide more services for a better shared future. It's an honor for me to release my 10th annual report today as we mark the 50th anniversary of the Ombudsman's Office. The Ontario Ombudsman has been providing invaluable assistance to Ontarians for 50 years by helping improve public services and protecting their rights. It's an
honor to release my 10th annual report today as we mark the 50th anniversary of the Ombudsman's Office. The Ontario Ombudsman has been providing valuable assistance to Ontarians for 50 years by helping improve public services and protecting their rights.
When this office was first established in 1975, the vision was that it would stand for the rights of all Ontarians. Its original logo was a griffin, the symbol of a strong protector of people's rights and the rule of law. We steadfastly support that mission, and we incorporated the griffin into our 50th anniversary logo as a reminder of those roots. Over the past 50 years, we have handled more than 1 million cases and conducted hundreds of investigations, resulting in more than 1,300 recommendations that have improved public services. The vast majority of Ombudsman recommendations for corrective action have been implemented, benefiting millions of Ontarians. This year is also significant because we are reporting our highest case count in 30 years. We are truly serving more people in more ways than ever before. Cette année est également importante.
This year is also significant because we are reporting our highest case count in 30 years, and we are serving more people in more ways than ever before.
675 cases that we received this year are a testament to the need for our services. And we managed this high case volume with great efficiency, resolving 42% of them in 1 week and 53% within 2 weeks. This reflects our ongoing commitment to timely, impactful outcomes. However, I have to say that the scope of this work makes it very challenging to present an omnibus report like this one. Our mandate is vast, and there are many issues to cover in a limited time. I want to address a few key points, and I'll take your questions later. While much of our work addresses concerns around service delivery, many of the issues that we encounter go far beyond mere inefficiencies. They raise profound questions about fundamental human rights. Nowhere is this more evident than in Ontario's correctional system, which is frankly in a growing state of crisis. I say this based on experience and evidence. We receive thousands of complaints about correctional facilities every year, and our team visited 12 facilities across the province. Complaints have skyrocketed by 55% to a record of almost 7,000. We are in regular contact with senior leadership in the facilities and at the Ministry of the Solicitor General to proactively alert them to problems. And this enables us to contribute to satisfactory resolutions in hundreds of cases. However, many of those complaints were about more severe entrenched problems. Overcrowding, 3 inmates in cells made for 2. Frequent lockdowns, inadequate health care, Indigenous inmates with no access to a Native inmate liaison officer, inmates with mental health issues being placed in segregation, which is not supposed to happen. And then there was the Maplehurst incident, a 2-day ordeal in December of 2023, where many inmates were so poorly treated that they have had the charges against them reduced or even dismissed by judges. Now that the internal investigations into that incident are complete, I have launched an investigation into how the ministry handled it and what it's doing to prevent it from happening again. Overall, the conditions that we are seeing and hearing about in correctional system not only fail to meet the basic expectations of fairness and dignity, but in some cases actively undermine the very principles of justice and human rights that we are committed to protecting. This is a challenge that requires urgent attention and a long-term commitment to meaningful reform. Dans l'ensemble, les conditions.
Overall, the conditions we are seeing and hearing about in the correctional system not only fail to meet basic expectations of fairness and dignity, but in some cases actively undermine the very principles of justice and human rights we are committed to protecting. This is a challenge that requires urgent attention and a long-term commitment to meaningful reform.
Note, we also saw a huge increase in complaints from young people in detention and custody, another group whose rights that we have protected for 50 years. Our team visited several youth justice centers this year as complaints about them more than doubled. We met directly with hundreds of young people in these facilities to make sure that they knew their rights, and we helped them resolve their concerns wherever possible. Now, this leads me to some other highlights in other important areas of my mandate that I want to touch on, however briefly. Children and youth. I want Ontarians to know that we're the Ombudsman for all children, whether they are in school, daycare, residential care, or receiving social services. There are numerous examples of results that we've achieved in these areas throughout the report this year. But one area of progress that I want to note is that the province has heard our concerns about older teens who are transitioning out of care, out of the child welfare system. For the first time, it is moving to amend legislation to ensure that we have oversight of all services for 18 to 22-year-olds, and that those young people are informed of their right to contact us. We are also making progress in our ongoing investigation regarding children being placed in unlicensed settings, which I hope to report on in the coming months. Municipalities. This is our 10th year of reporting on our work with municipalities, and we received a record number of cases about them. We found that many municipalities are greatly receptive to the best practices and expertise that we share with them to improve fairness, transparency, and accountability at the local level. And the province has also heard our suggestions for strengthening codes of conduct and the Integrity Commissioner framework. This is right in our wheelhouse as an independent oversight institution, and it benefits people right across the province. Les services en français. Le commissaire aux services en français publiera son
French language services. The French Language Services Commissioner will release his own annual report in December, but I want to say I am gratified by the way the community has responded to the results achieved by him and his unit. In fact, I want to share one bit of news that is not in today's report because it just happened a few weeks ago. In 2021, we received a complaint that the Ontario Fire Code was not available in French. It was not required by law because technically the code is a regulation, not legislation. But we pointed out that it should be available in French as a matter of public safety. A translation was promised by 2023, but did not happen. So our French Language Services unit kept following up. This month, the Ministry of the Solicitor General approved a new regulation amending the code and creating the first French version. It is now online and will officially come into force in January.
The French Language Service Commissioner, Carl Bouchard, will release his own report in December, but I want to say that I'm very gratified by the way the Francophone community has responded to the results achieved by him and his unit. In fact, I want to share one bit of news that is not in today's report because it just happened a few weeks ago. In 2021, we received a complaint that the Ontario Fire Code was not available in French. It's not required by law because technically the code is a regulation, not legislation. But we pointed out that it should be available in French as a matter of public safety. This month, the Ministry of the Solicitor General approved a new regulation amending the code and creating the first French version. With respect to good governance, this is a bit of good news that leads me to my final highlight, which recognizes the positive impact that our work can have. Earlier this year, I launched the Ombudsman's Award for Good Governance to reinforce the link between sound administration, democratic values, and the protection of rights. And I presented the first Good Governance Award to the Ontario Provincial Police to recognize its efforts to improve its service to the public in French. J'ai remis le premier prix pour la bonne gouvernance à la police provinciale de l'Ontario pour
I awarded the OPP the first prize for their efforts in improving French language services.
Ombudsman institutions across the country. These principles summarize those established by the United Nations and the European Commission to define, promote, and protect the essential role of ombudsman offices in upholding good governance, protecting individual rights, and reinforcing public trust in democratic institutions. They will benefit the people and the public authorities that we all serve. Of course, there's much more of interest in this report. I invite you to access it online through our brand new website, which we redesigned this year to make it easier to interact with us and to find all the information you need. So with that, I'd be happy to take your questions.
Based on your findings, could one of the solutions be building more jails in this province?
Well, findings. We don't have any findings yet because we're in the midst of the investigation. What we've reported on over the past few years, actually, is there is overcrowding in the correctional facilities, staff shortages. So we'll look to see to what degree that played a role in the Maplehurst incident. So I can't pronounce too much on that. What I can tell you, apart from the investigation, though, is just over the past few years, we've seen the conditions degrade in the correctional facilities. I will never forget my visit to the Thunder Bay Jail, where the inmates were lined up on one side of the hallway and the correctional officers and staff on the other side, and they were both pleading with us to do what we could to bring change. And the inmates were giving credit to the staff, saying they're keeping a lid on this, they're doing their best, but we're finding people housed in broom closets and former pantries and stuff. So the system has deteriorated. It's in crisis, and I say crisis because when facilities are at 155% capacity, and when you have staffing shortages, and when people are not getting health care, when they're not getting access to Indigenous services, that's a problem. And but when those problems within the institutions spill out into the administration of justice, and we have sentences being reduced or charges being stayed because of the breaches of fundamental rights within those correctional facilities, that's a problem. It's a big problem. And of course, it matters to all of us because those people that in the correctional facility, most of them have not been convicted of anything. They're awaiting trial. They are brothers and fathers and sons, but also they're our neighbors, right? That it's in our interests for those people not to come out more broken than when they went in, and to be rehabilitated as much as possible. So the investments in humane housing and conditions and rehabilitative services, I think, is in all our best interest, and it should matter to all of us what goes on there.
Could you better spell out the difference between the investigation that you've concluded when it comes to Maplehurst and what you still want to be able to accomplish with another investigation?
Well, so the investigation into Maplehurst is surrounding that incident and what and how the Solicitor General responded to that incident, and what's going to be done to prevent in the future. So that is that incident. We have done an investigation into the use of segregation of solitary confinement, and we've seen great improvements in that regard, and I give credit for that. So, but then occasionally, as I just mentioned, we are seeing people with mental health issues being put in segregation. So we're on this all the time. Of those 7,000 complaints, as I said, we resolve hundreds of them every year. We have a good working relationship with the Ministry of the Solicitor General. They are attentive to us. We meet regularly. We bring these issues to their attention, and we get a lot of good results. But there is some significant work to be done for systemic reform, for sure.
You gave an answer to my colleague. You talked about those people living in a community. Can we believe that there's a difference in the population, and there's also other problems that you noted in youth centers and women's centers? Answer. This is a good question, and I don't have stats about it, but overall I would say that the principles are the same. We should apply the same principles. People deserve to be treated with dignity and to have their rights respected. When we don't have enough staff, it creates problem. Question: can we see the same significant problems in women facilities? Answer: no, I wouldn't be able to say that. I will be able to provide more details, but I do not have this impression. Question. You mentioned Thunder Bay Correctional Facility. You said you noted incidents. What do you think with your personal experience? Answer. I visited the Maplehurst facility about a couple of months ago. We directly spoke with prisoners. They told us that some of them missed their trials because of a lack of transportation. Some people have other health problems, for example, dental issues. They need to see a dentist, but it takes months for them to receive a prescription. They may be prescribed medication, but they are not able to receive them in prison. We want to be able to solve problems, and in most of the cases we can solve those problems.
Incident, like you have not looked into that at all, like that is not part of this report at all, this whole incident we've heard about with them stripped down to their underwear?
That's right. That's a new investigation that's not been completed yet. It's ongoing, and it is not part of this report. But
have you already conducted interviews on that? Is there anything you can say about it?
Not really. No, it's in the early stages of the investigation. We launched it in May. We're organizing interviews and reviewing documents at this stage.
Do you see it in some way connected to something larger, systemic, based on what you're seeing when it comes to correctional facilities here in this report?
Well, as I said in response to another question, I'm not going to draw any conclusions about Maplehurst incident, but I will say that I have noticed over the past few years some systemic issues in corrections. Really the degrading of conditions, the overpopulation now, 155% in some institutions, staff shortages, and it's creating issues of safety for staff as well as inmates. And correctional officers complain to me, as much as the inmates do, about the need to fix things in certain institutions, and that they don't have the resources, for example, to deal with inmates that have, either developmental disabilities or mental health problems. They just don't have the tools. So it puts them in a difficult position to have to manage that because they're not trained and they don't have the tools. And so, this contributes to a problem, or reflects a problem, rather, that we did in another report on adults with developmental disabilities. When supports and services are lacking for them, they often end up in prisons or in jails or in segregation, and then the staff don't have the capacity to treat them properly. So, there is a societal connection to all this. It's part of a bigger picture for sure.
We've heard the opposition talk a lot about the need to address the court backlog, and that I think they believe that would have some trickle-down effect to improving situations at our correctional facilities. Are you able to ascertain to what degree that would or wouldn't help?
I can't really comment on that. I mean, when we make recommendations or findings, it's evidence-based, and so we haven't really studied that issue of the problem, so I can't pronounce on that.
But you did talk about the fact that most people, right, are awaiting trial, innocent by law. So you can't ascertain.
Well, I think, there's a certain amount of logic that you could apply to that, obviously, that if you are incarcerating more people and you have a fixed capacity, then you're going to have overcrowding and the problems that flow from the overcrowding, the tensions and the safety issues and the ability to care and serve for those people that are incarcerated, providing them health care and rehabilitative services. So, it's a logical thought process.
Just back to Maplehurst, I believe there was mention that you had recently visited the facility. Can you tell us a bit about what you saw during your visit, and is that facility a source of any complaints that were included in your report?
Yeah, I think there's reference. I think there's a reference to some complaints from Maplehurst. I can't remember. You'll forgive me if I don't have all 30,000 cases memorized, but and all 103 pages of the report. But what I saw there was a very professional leadership team that wants to make things better. I saw inmates that the few that we talked to on that visit saying that they were frustrated and they felt like they were not treated humanely, and so. that all ties into, and of course there was an outbreak of an infection there at one time. So these institutions, I think, are under a lot of strain. As I just said, if you keep raising the populations in a fixed amount of space, and then you have staff shortages, and there aren't enough people there to adequately, safely run the prison, then you have lockdowns, right? And which leads to frustrations, which leads to people not getting access to programs that they may be entitled to, and it just the cauldron starts heating up and the pressures build.
And just changing gears a little bit, there was also mention of 15 cases of families surrendering custody of their children with complex special needs to children's aid societies. Just a few questions on that. One, can you just tell us a bit about kind of more about these cases and what you found? Were you expecting this number, like 15 cases, and were they concentrated in any kind of regions of the province?
Well, I can't speak to the regional distribution, but this is an issue that my office has been dealing with for decades, frankly, and we put out a report years ago about this situation, and it still endures, where some parents are at their wits' end and without the ability to access supports and services find themselves come to that heartbreaking conclusion that they have to surrender their children to get the appropriate care. So we're shining a light on this. We raise it, and we engage with the ministry to address these issues and try and get some resolution. And at some point, maybe we'll have to do another investigation at some point.
Like you mentioned, you've raised this before, and you've kind of been highlighting it over the years. Are you surprised it's still happening?
Well, I don't know about surprise, but it's disappointing, and some of these cases are very heartbreaking and harrowing. So what we do is we continue to intervene, and we resolve a lot of individual cases. That's the one thing, I guess, that is something to be slightly optimistic about, is that we are able, with our intervention, to get access to supports and services for a lot of these families.
When I'm looking at your updates on completed investigations, I mean, they are presented as, good news that changes are happening, but in some cases, it's from so long ago, like it's this one, A Matter of Life and Death. There was an update from 2016, another one from 2017. I mean, what's your response that it seems to sometimes take so long?
Well, so let's be clear about this. The recommendations are largely satisfied in most of those investigations, but some of them call for follow-up. So one of the recommendations will be, report back to us every 6 months, and report back to us anytime you made a significant change. Report back to us if there's ever new legislation. And in some of those reports, I'm thinking about long-term care in particular, there is legislation that we're waiting for. So that takes time to work through the process. So, but I would say that with all of those older reports, essentially most of the recommendations have been satisfied. And in that one, I mean, use of force training, de-escalation training. We wanted a regulation. They didn't want to put it in a regulation, but essentially most of those recommendations have been satisfied.
Just to get back on the families surrendering their child for services, is there, I know you said you can't talk about the specific regions where these cases are happening, but is there any way you can give us clues on whether this is a general provincial issue or if it's happening more specifically in some regions than
Happy
others?
to, look into that offline, and I don't have that information in front of me, but we can definitely look into that, and if there's a way to provide you with a breakdown, then do it.
And you talked about how your mandate is very vast, and we read about the significant increase of complaints in the report. Do you feel that the Ombudsman's office has enough resources and the scope is good, or is there any changes that need to be brought to your office?
No, I think we have what we need to do it as long as our funding stays secure, and that's one of the reasons why my colleagues and I came up with those principles, reflecting what the UN resolution says and what the Venice Principle says, is that these independent oversight offices, which are democratic institutions, have to be stable and secure in their funding and have to be protected from any intervention. So we're doing this ahead of time. We're in good shape for now. I would say that some offices have even more of a broad mandate than we do. I'm thinking of the New Zealand Ombudsman has 5,000 public sector bodies. Some of my counterparts across the country have public interest disclosure and privacy as part of their mandate. So, no, I think we have a fantastic team of very passionate people who are committed to serving the public in Ontario, and we have what we need to do the job.
Out of these cases where your office helped people, is there one that stands out that sort of you're most proud of?
Well, so it's a recent one. That's why it's in my mind, is that a gentleman experiencing homelessness had won a substantial lottery ticket, and I think it was like $500,000 or something, and didn't have the identification. And we intervened to assist with the registrar office and got that identification issue cleared up and was able to claim the prize.
He's not homeless anymore.
I hope not.
Des exemples des chansons avec le mot éclipse?
Do you have examples of songs with the word eclipse? There's a quotation in this report that says that there was a list of songs recommended, but there were no equivalent in French.
D'autres questions?
We have a caller on the line. Stand by 1 second.
Okay.
Amy Dempsey-Raven with Toronto Star. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Last week, we published a story that ties into two issues raised in your report related to child welfare. It was about a teen whose parents were forced to surrender care to CAS because they couldn't get appropriate medical care for her mental health issues. She was then housed in hotels for a year because CAS couldn't get treatment for her either. And during that time, she developed a drug addiction and died. So I wanted to ask, because I feel that it's acknowledged in the report that these two issues are connected. First, what are you learning from these kids and their families about what they're facing? Can you speak to your own personal reflections on what is happening to them and what our duty is as a province when it comes to these kids?
Well, I'm going to tread carefully there because your question partly weighs into one of the investigations that's ongoing. As you probably know, we're doing an investigation into the phenomenon of children and youth being housed in inappropriate settings like hotels. So I can't comment on any findings or conclusions or information that is part of that investigation. On the issue of surrendering children to authorities in order to, out of desperation to get them the supports and services they need, I think I spoke to that a moment ago, and it's a serious problem. It's a serious problem that's going to call for more investment and a commitment to make sure that, community care is there and that families can stay integrated and that they can work through these issues together and that the children can get the supports and services they need while being with their families, if that's appropriate.
Thank you. And with regards to the number of kids, the 15 kids who were abandoned in the past year, or whose parents were forced to relinquish care, is that a number that has increased over years before? Is that something that your office was expecting to see? I know that 20 years ago your office did a report on this, and it's still happening today. But I'm wondering what about what's happened in the interim. Is it a sort of problem that's resurfacing now in recent years since the pandemic, or has it been consistent over the years?
That's a good question, and I'm sorry I don't think I'm able to answer that in terms of the statistics and the numbers and, where we're coming from and where we are now. I don't have the information to be able to make that comparison. I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's fine. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
No more calls.
OK, je vous souhaite une belle été. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you. I wish you a great summer.